This is the 5-minute guide to the Bretagne class battleships of the French Navy. The Bretagne class were designed in a period where the French looked up at their surroundings and realized their navy actually had some serious problems. Before the Dreadnought Revolution, every other nation had seen the sense of designing a single battleship and then building a whole class to the same design. By contrast, partially due to some strange ideas about design and partially due to a somewhat corrupt system that meant every company in an industry had to get some part of a contract, the French had built what was called the Fleet of Experiments, a series of effectively handcrafted artisan battleships where none were alike. Even an attempt at building a single class had left them with 3 unique ships that were never quite fully compatible. Whilst they eventually mostly fixed this, it meant that by 1910 France had precisely 0 dreadnoughts in service or under construction. By contrast, the British had 10 plus 5 battle cruisers, Germany had 8 and 1 and the United States 6 and 1. They finally got around to building their first 4 dreadnoughts, the Corbett class, but desperately needed more ships. Unfortunately, the Corbettes were about as big a ship as you could build in 1910 era France, so the new design would have to be based on them. There was a desire to arm the ships with 13.4-inch guns, but with the same turret layout as Corbett the weight was too much. Luckily someone realized that wing turrets were silly, and by putting in a single centerline turret you could still have a 10-gun broadside without the need for 6 turrets. Therefore the ships had 10 13.4-inch guns in 5 twin turrets, a pair super firing forward, a pair super firing at the rear, and 1 right in the middle. 22 secondary guns of 5.5-inch caliber were joined by 4 47mm guns and 4 torpedo tubes to complete the armament. With a speed of 20 knots they were somewhat slow despite the rather thin 11-inch belt armor, although the French were not quite able to resist the urge to tinker, so each ship had a different number of boilers, each from a different manufacturer. 4 ships were laid down, the Bretagne, the Lorraine, the Provence and the Vassilios Constantinus. Wait, that last one doesn't sound French. That's because it isn't. The Greek navy desperately wanted battleships and had come up with a cunning plan. They knew France and Germany hated each other, so they reasoned that if they ordered one from each side then at least one of them would deliver. However, events turned against them because France and Germany promptly went to war with each other and abandoned both ships on the slipways. Should have gone to the British really, they might have taken the ships away to fight Germany, but at least you would have gotten them back afterwards. Anyway, what about that other Greek ship? Well, that's a story for another time. Back to the French, all 3 ships entered service in 1916 and became the leading ships of the French fleet. Mostly they spent their time deterring the Austro-Hungarian fleet from coming out of harbour, although in a bout of painful irony the Provence was frequently used to intimidate the Greek government away from supporting Germany. After the First World War the French had to cut their naval budget and only Bretagne remained in full active service the whole time. But as finances improved all 3 came back into service and the French desire to tinker and customize re-emerged. Each ship would therefore receive different numbers of oil-fired boilers to improve their performance as well as slightly different changes to their turbines and all got tripod masts, although again always to slightly different layouts. Lorraine also had her center turret taken out in 1935 and replaced with an aircraft catapult and hangar. By the outbreak of the Second World War they were inevitably each almost custom-made battleships. I guess some old habits really stick. Just for good measure, they would also each receive different anti-aircraft fits in stages throughout this period with a variety of 8mm machine guns, 13.2mm heavy machine guns, 20, 40, and 75mm cannon and 3.9-inch anti-aircraft guns added in exchange for varying numbers of 5.5-inch secondary guns. Once in the war the Provence spent time hunting for raiders, Bretagne had fun escorting convoys, whilst Lorraine joined forces ready for heavy combat. In 1940 the Bretagne was sent to join Provence. It would be a fateful decision. By June 1940 France was on the verge of falling to the Nazi invasion and there was serious concern in the UK the Germans might seize the French fleet. By July a British force had arrived at the French port of Mers-el-Kebir with an ultimatum. This was quite detailed and had many options to it, but thanks to some truly stupendous idiocy by the French admiral in charge, it was transmitted to the French government as simply join us or scuttle yourselves, which the government rejected. Not knowing this, the British took the French refusal to mean they were not interested in any of the neutral options either, and felt that they had to open fire. The thin armor of the French ships came back to haunt them as Bretagne was hit by 4 15-inch shells and exploded. Provence was set on fire and sank to the bottom of the harbor, although she was later salvaged. As it turned out, when the Germans did try to seize the French fleet sometime later, the French Navy honored its commitment to not help them and scuttled themselves. As a result, the attack on the French fleet by the British is still a controversial subject to this day. The Lorraine had a somewhat happier fate, initially being disarmed in Alexandria. In late 1942 she joined the Free French forces and spent most of 1943 training and refitting, before helping in the invasion of southern France, supporting the landings with her main battery gunfire, before heading to Britain, where she spent the last months of the war shooting up German-occupied fortresses in northern France. After the war she served as a training and accommodation ship until 1953, when she was sold for scrapping. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below.